Hey, welcome back to another video. I am Ramona, and today's video is what is the scariest experience you've had in your life that you believe that can only be attributed to the paranormal? So mouthful, right? Okay. Here we go. I once opened a bag of M&Ms only to find they were all yellow, and they're going to need pictures and evidence if that's true. Good way to start it off, just amusing. One time, when I was young, maybe 6 or so, I was having nightmares. I crawled into my mom and dad's bed and attempted to sleep through the rest of the night with them. They both fell asleep, but I was still wide awake. I saw a blue glowing tapir walking across the room. I live in the middle of the United States, no zoos anywhere, and this baffles me. And the reply was, any chance this could have been sleep paralysis? Later on in life, when I learned about sleep paralysis, I thought that it could have been, but I was fully able to move my arms, my eyes, my head during the time I witnessed it. It didn't feel scary either, just very serene and natural. And the reply was, sounds like you may have been astral projecting. Well, it's very possible. No one knows. I had a very realistic nightmare of Axemen with masks and black robes knocking on my door. I know not I didn't know who it was, and I thought that it was a friend of mine, so I opened the door and the Axeman opened it and hit me with the axe on the head. I still was awake and I saw the Axeman head to my mother's room. Then I heard her scream and I wake up in shock. I could feel some sensation into my head as if somebody had hit me in the head, but there was no pain. It was scary, and that happened over 8 years ago. That's kind of weird. Not exactly paranormal, I guess, but after several intense sessions with DMT, when I really opened my mind up to the possibility of the universe and how much is happening that we cannot even begin to fathom, that realization is both terrifying and strangely comforting. Back when I started working in a new town, my best friend was studying at one university town over. We met once a week at the cinema in her town for a sneak preview. One night after the film was over, we said our goodbyes and I hurried to my car to drive home. When I rolled off the parking lot, I was hit by the thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to take the country road home instead of the highway? I shook my head, wondering where that thought came from, because taking that way would at least double the time I needed to go home and had to go to work the next morning. So I headed towards the highway instead. I've never been scared of driving before or after that night, but I was almost shaking with fright when I rolled onto the highway. The road was quite empty, but eventually I closed up to a truck. On any normal day, I just overtake it, and I couldn't bring myself to do it. Somehow that truck meant safety to me. Thoughts crossed my mind about what the last thoughts of people getting hit by wrong-way drivers are. Again, no idea where that came from. Right before I reached my exit, a wrong-way driver passed us. As of today, I have not found a logical reason for my fear that night. I didn't listen to the radio. I had a CD playing. There wasn't music or the radio in the cinema as well, and it was well before the time of smartphones. Something or someone warned me. I maybe almost astral projected when I was a kid by accident. So when I was around 9 or 10, I was looking in the bathroom mirror and I was asking myself, who am I, over and over again. But I would still remember it to this day, because I swear it felt like I was starting to float out of myself, like my perception just started to flutter upwards. It scared me, and I shook it off and stopped. Years later, I heard the explanation that basically your brain can get bored and fuck with you. I think that's a legitimate explanation. Cut a ping pong ball in half. Put on some white noise like a static or fan, something loud enough to drown out the outside noises, but not something as cerebral as music. Light a few candles. The room should be lit but dim. Lay down and put the ping pong halves on your eyes. Try to meditate with your eyes open for at least half an hour. Your brain will start entertaining itself. You will hear and see things that are not there. I guess that's, advice for if you want to pursue that. I was definitely telepathically communicated with another human being while being on both high on shrooms. I have done this too. I think my dog communicates with me telepathically. He will often just come and sit down by me and look at me. I sense he wants a treat, or to go out. I usually guess right the first time. Once, when I was 12 or 13, I was awoken in my room to what sounded like voices and moving furniture. I peeked over the covers and said out loud, Mom? Then, as if on cue, all the air out of the room was sucked out, and these two bright figures run in and hold me down. I thrash around and wake up covered in sweat. My stepdad checked the house, and there was no sign of break-ins or attempts. Definitely weird. And someone asked, can you describe the figures more? Sounds like an alien abduction. They were alien looking. Well, so very possible. I was walking through the park. It was quite empty. Right ahead were benches, and I looked around and saw a man sitting there who looked like he was in pain, holding his head. Path was quite uneven, so for a second I looked down to my feet, and then I looked back up, and there was no man. Instead, there were two mothers sitting and talking with each other, rocking their strollers. And the area the benches in looked sunnier than before. There was no man in sight. There was no time for him to go anywhere. My grandmother had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's when I was a teenager. After my grandfather died, she just kept getting sicker. My parents decided to move her in with us so that we could keep a closer eye on her. A couple of months later, she accidentally fell and broke her hip. My dad rushed her to the hospital, and I stayed home with my mom. My grandmother used to sit in the same spot every day, a big comfy chair in the middle of the living room. At night, after my dad rushed my grandmother to the hospital, I walked through the living room and saw a shadow, a black silhouette of a man standing behind the big chair. I jumped from fright, and as soon as I took my eyes off of it, it was gone. I thought it was just my imagination, so I brushed it off and ran back to my room. A couple of hours later, I was in my room, and my mom was in the living room, watching TV, when I suddenly heard her scream bloody murder. I ran to the living room. Her hand was on her chest, and she was heaving. Her eyes were nearly bulging out. I asked her if she was okay, and she said, I could have sworn I saw your father standing behind that chair. Needless to say, my dad and my grandfather looked eerily alike. I was either 13 or 14, home alone one evening before my parents got home from work. In my room watching TV when I hear the blinds from our patio door in the room and in the kitchen slightly move. I freak out, go take a look, and notice them just stopping as I arrived. I was weirded out in my head, but I'd explained it as a current that passed in the house since our heating was on. As I am heading back in the room, I hear a sharp thump sound as if something has fallen. I'm freaking out now and think there is someone in the house. I just know there's no way they could have gotten to the kitchen and then my room without me noticing. I peek inside and see my baseball player statue that has a flat base sliding sideways on the dresser. Somehow it got knocked over. I frickin' run downstairs, put on the TV on full blast as I didn't want to hear anything else, and waited terrified for my parents to get home. After that evening, I never experienced anything freaky in that house. My friend's boyfriend committed suicide a few years ago. He played baseball all through his youth and high school. His initials were BR, and he always wore number 9. Well, her cable box kept resetting itself one day shortly after his death, and the error code was BR09. I called the cable company to find out what the error code meant. It didn't exist. The cable box worked fine the next day, and from then on. For several years, I experienced what is commonly called sleep paralysis. The first experience was the one that was the most terrifying. I was taking a nap on Christmas Day. I had the common experiences of a visceral buzzing in my ear and head, and a feeling of terrible evil coming upon me. I woke, but I couldn't open my eyes or move a muscle. I then felt someone grab onto my feet and start crawling up my body. I felt completely overcome with evil. Finally, I pushed it all back and opened my eyes and found myself alone. Similar experiences happened for years. Each was terrifying, but almost became commonplace. I discovered that it was sleep paralysis, and someone said the best way to deal with it was to give in to it and not to fight it. One day, I was taking a nap in my bed in the basement. My brother was a couple rooms down in our entertainment room. I felt that familiar visceral buzzing. My eyes opened and I couldn't move. I decided to let go this time and gave in to it. As soon as I had done that, my body started to sit up, and I saw my arm rising, and one thought dominated my mind. I had to kill my brother. I was halfway up, and panic set in, and I pushed back as hard as I could, and eventually woke up panting and terrified. I never gave in to it again. It's lessened over the past few years, but every year or so, it will come back. That's pretty terrifying right there. I've shared this story before, but it fits here. In high school, me and my friends started and ran a paranormal investigators club. We were lame, but it was mostly just an excuse to hang out. We did have a mild interest in ghosts, and our town school had plenty of urban legends to go off of. We didn't get permission from the school to have activities outside the campus, and we couldn't go to any buildings that had urban legends surrounding them, so we were stuck inside of buildings on campus at night. So we had a bunch of outings where we took photos of random things, looked for orbs. One day we got our hands on a tape recorder. We had ourselves a little seance. We formed a circle, did a generic greeting to any spiritual things that might be present, and included some instructions. We were going to leave the tape on for 2 minutes, and the group was going to be silent. This was a Friday night. After the tape, we packed it up and went home. Our next club meeting was the following Tuesday, so our teacher, chaperone, endorsement was a nice guy, but not anything special as far as teachers go. You know the type. So we sit down and started talking, and the teacher tells us that we should probably listen to the tape. So we fire it up. Everything is going exactly like we remembered. Silence begins. About 45 seconds in, the tape screeches, makes a sound like it's speeding up, and then a low, gravelly voice we hear, "Get out." Tape screeches again, resumes. Entire 2 minutes of silence accounted for. I don't know what to make of that event. All I know is I don't believe the tape was doctored. A, I don't think the teacher had the skills to do it, and B, it was a physical tape, not digital, and the recorder was probably older than I am. It might not have been a big deal to just go over and tape over the silence, but I don't think he accounts for the strange sounds the tape, but it doesn't take into account the strange sounds that the tape made. Not me, but an old friend of mine. Sorry, it's not a first-hand experience. When he was 6 or 8 years old, he was lying in bed at night when an old man with an old-fashioned wheelbarrow came walking through his room. Came in through one wall and exited out the other. Friend's mom confirmed the story by saying that he came crying, screaming into her room and told her what had happened. I had a dream where I was 3 years old about being chased through an old house with a man with a chainsaw. The aged green walls and wooden floors were still ingrained in my memory. My only escape was hopping from the second floor down to the first, where I was teleported back to bed with my parents. The particular spooky part didn't come until years later. My family went on vacation for spring break to some town across the coast. We stayed in a home that was part of an older settlement in Washington state. Upon entering the house, I was freaked out. It was the exact home I had dreamed of years ago, right down to the walls and the staircase. I felt exceedingly uncomfortable for our entire stay. I read in a book long after that, unbeknownst to my parents, the neighborhood we were staying in is notably haunted due to some murders that took place there in the 1800s. My husband was friends with a gypsy. We were hanging out one night, and the gypsy suggested we do the Ouija thing. I had done it once before with a friend at another friend's house and got surprisingly accurate answers to questions that neither of us could have known in advance. But this was a few years later. This time the gypsy just wrote the letters and yes and no on pieces of paper, and we turned to ordinary drinking glass upside down and put 2 fingers on it and asked questions. We were in our 20s. We were asking if the spirit believed in God. It said yes, God is love. We weren't Christians. We asked all kinds of stupid stuff, but then started bugging the spirit to tell us if it was good or evil. The glass started making small circles very quickly, then flew across the room and smashed on the wall. We all ran out as fast as we could. I honestly don't see how the gypsy might have caused the glass to shoot as far as it did, with 2 fingers on top. But for years later, I asked if he had done it himself, and he insisted that it wasn't him. When I was maybe 10 years old, I was staying at a relative's distant house after a family function. I had gone to bed upstairs as one of the 3 bedrooms directly off a large landing at the top of the stairs. I woke up needing to pee, so I crept downstairs, which was dark as the other 2 folks, both older relatives, had gone to bed. I went back upstairs and climbed into bed. Shortly thereafter, I curiously heard footfalls on the stairs. They were very low but unmistakable. I couldn't see anything beyond the floor except the darkness of the landing. I hid under the covers until the footsteps stopped at the top of the stairs abruptly. I snuck a peek, but there was no one there. I hid again, and the footsteps began again, walking in slow circles around the foyer area. I stayed with my head under the covers for what seemed like eons, and eventually fell asleep. The next morning I told my host about it, and he was not surprised in the least. He told me several other stories about happenings on this isolated, lonely farmhouse in the middle of BFE that scared me to death. I've never been back, nor do I plan to. When I was younger, my parents got me a bunk bed so I could have friends come over and spend the night. I know, try to be the cool kid in elementary school who invited his friends over. Well, it was a trick. Eventually, soon after my uncle moved in with us, he crashed in the bottom bunk while I slept on the top. My uncle also happened to be bartending at the time, so he often came home really late, like 2 a.m., for example. Sometimes a bit intoxicated, sometimes not. Well, one night after he comes home and wakes me up from all the noise he makes, I tell him good night, then roll over and try to fall back asleep. After falling back asleep, maybe 30 minutes later, I feel the most unbelievable strong grasp on my arm. Imagine a grown man taking his hand and wrapping it around your entire forearm. That's what it felt like for maybe a good 2 seconds, then gone. Of course, it woke me up, freaked me out. I looked down thinking it was my uncle fucking with me. He was passed out on his stomach. To this day, I don't know what caused it. I know for a fact it woke me up, so it could have been some weird dream where the feelings transferred over the real world a little bit. Not scary, but I still remember it. I was playing on my computer, Minecraft, I think. Suddenly, I looked to my side and saw a red-haired boy dressed in green, very interested in my game. When I looked at my hands to see if I was just sleeping, he disappeared completely. He was stuck on my head. I can't forget his face, but I can't remember it clearly. Now he is one of my characters. As a wee lad, back when I was still being put down for naps every day, as soon as my mom left the room, this shadow thing would pop up, as if it were crouching at the end of my bed, waiting. He had no face, yet he stared at me. He never did more than stand there, and it would be only during nap time. At first I was terrified, and as time went on I got used to his presence. I was always uncomfortable with him there, though, and never got any sleep. I haven't seen him since I stopped taking naps, but I still sometimes feel him, if that makes any sense. I still live in the same house. One time when I was a little kid trying to fall asleep, my door cracked open. All I could see was the silhouette of a figure that was obviously the doll Chucky. I guess I forgot that I had a little sister who was the exact same size and shape, so I jumped off the bed screaming and ran past it, shoved it out of the way, and ran to my parents' room. Then we both heard my little sister sobbing. She had a nightmare and wanted to sleep with me because she was scared, but I absolutely scared the shit out of her even more. Screw the prompt. I wanted to tell that story. Me and my buddy were playing Super NES in my room. Yeah, I'm that old. When suddenly the room filled with this thick and hazy cigarette smoke. The smell of nicotine was overpowering, and we were both really confused, as nobody in my family ever smoked, and we lived in a detached house, so it couldn't have been the neighbors either. The smoke hung around for about a minute, then it cleared and vanished as suddenly as it arrived. Later that afternoon, we found out that my friend's mom had used a Ouija board to contact her father, my friend's grandfather, who had died a year previous from lung cancer. Apparently, he smoked 60 a day and always smelled like cigarettes. She was unable to contact him that day, and that's the only explanation we have for that weirdness. One night, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, while I was sleeping, I was abruptly woken by some really loud banging on my bedroom door. Nobody was there, and I have no idea what happened. When I was about 13 years old, we lived in a really old house that was on a farm. One time, my parents were out really late, and me and my brother were the only ones home. I was sitting in living room 1, and my brother went to get a drink or of water or something. My kitchen was next to that sort of living room 2, and they had a sort of bar on the side with a big window cut into the wall, so you could see the kitchen from living room 2. All these rooms were very small, so when my brother left living room 1, I saw him stop dead in his tracks in living room 2, facing the bar, looking into the kitchen. He walked back in and asked what happened. I asked what happened. He said he saw a black figure with glowing red eyes. Me and my brother used to love ghost hunting and stuff like that, but I can tell when he was seriously scared. For a few weeks later, my brother had a friend over and left the room to go grab a bag in living room 1. He came running back to the room and said, "Dude, I saw a black shadow in the kitchen with red eyes." I immediately suspected my brother was trying to mess with me, so I looked at him and said, "Shut up, stop," and laughed it off. But my brother's friend asked what I was talking about, and my brother swore on our dead dog, that was something we didn't mess with, that he never told anyone except me. That house had a lot of creepy things to it and negative energies. We had about 7 pets die in that house. Never looked back when we left. Not scary at all, but one day I was grabbing something from the fridge and I closed it up and took a step or so about 2.5 feet back, and then I hear a soft clink. Turn around on the floor was a nickel, which fell from somewhere in the middle of the kitchen. It wasn't from my pocket or stuck somewhere because it made a sound like it dropped from somewhere up high. That was higher than my head. I went to a graveyard at about midnight with a group of friends to visit an old friend who died in a car accident. While we were standing around his grave telling good stories about him, I hear a faint voice of an elderly woman. One of my friends says out loud, "Oh shit, what the fuck?" I stand up and we look towards the source. I saw a very old woman, literally dressed in a white tattered nightgown and about 100 feet away. She started talking to us. "Sir, get over here now, I need help." We stood still. No one said a thing. The part that weirded me out is that she used the singular word sir when clearly there were 5 of us. She started walking closer and started speaking again, but even louder. "Boys, I need your help now." Note the plurality. Then she literally started running towards us, screaming nonsense. We were all scared out of our minds, so we ran back to the car with this old woman close behind. We reached the car, which was a two-door, and everyone got in before me, including the driver. So the driver's seat was blocking my entrance to the back seat. I yelled as I approached the car, and he got out and let me in. Doors slammed, and we flew down the small graveyard roads to the opposite side where the exit was. This is where shit got weird. We get to the other side of the graveyard in like 10 seconds. We're speeding down the exit, and we approach a curved road that is well lit, and the old lady ran into the road. No way she ran over there that fast. I see her trying to chase us down, and finally she lets out the most terrifying scream I've ever heard. Sounded like she was being murdered slowly and painfully. We fled the scene just seconds after and never returned. 4 other friends of mine can testify as witnesses to that night. By far the most terrifying experience in my life. This happened in 2007 when I was in high school. I was home alone and doing my homework when I felt someone slowly breathing on the back of my neck. When I turned back, no one was behind me. When I was in first grade, my room at the time was connected to our garage, and instead of being all the wood and door, it was mostly glass. I went in there one night to grab some things, and when I looked through the door, I saw what appeared to be a little girl around my age at the time, sitting on the other side looking straight at me. I, of course, freaked out and told my mom, but no one really believed me. Other than hearing weird knocks and cracks, I haven't had any other paranormal experiences. Last weekend I wanted egg salad, so I went to the chicken coop and collected 9 eggs. I washed them and put them in a pot to boil and left them with my dad to pick up my brother, leaving my mom to finish them. When I got back there were 10 eggs in the bowl. Of course I just assumed my mom added another egg. Nope. She was just as surprised as I when I counted 10 eggs, but there were only 9 when she took them out of the pot. My mom is not the type of person to play jokes or lie. I am a little OCD and counted the eggs at least 3 times, collecting, washing, and putting them in the pot. We tried to brush it off and finish the egg salad. It did taste pretty good. When I was 10, my great-grandfather passed away. My great-grandmother wasn't used to being in the house alone, so my dad and I put extra light fixture in the hallway for her. After we finished, I took an extension cord back down to the basement, tossed it into the table, and began walking up the stairs. As I was climbing the steps, I glanced to my right, beneath the wall, and saw a large pair of legs, dressed in slacks, walking to the table I just left. I bolted, ran past my grandma and dad on the way out of the house. There was only 3 of us in there. Once I was sitting on the couch with my sister in the living room. To the left and through a door of the TV room where my parents were. Directly in front of where my sister and I were sitting was the kitchen and the wall separating the 2 rooms. I was facing my sister when I heard cabinet doors move and a crash. We looked up and saw a dark figure floating towards the doorway to the kitchen. Sister and I looked at each other, confused because my parents were in the TV room. My mom rushed in and asked if we'd heard that. We wondered if it was my brother, but my mother reminded us that he wasn't even home. Then we peeked to the kitchen. Every cabinet door and drawer was open. Another creepy story. One summer, we went to a haunted hotel to poke around and see if we could get anything on camera. I was wearing a racer back tank top. When we were leaving, my sister asked me why I had scratched my back so hard, but I hadn't. I had slightly bloodied scratch marks running up and down my shoulder blade. I had just about been gone to sleep, or maybe just waking up. I had a strange case of sleep paralysis. if you could even call it that. It was a cliche, oh shit, can't move moment, but as I had many times before, but I couldn't see either. I was awake, but still in a dream. There was this old woman, surrounded in inky blackness, dragging me down the chain with a chain. She kept saying she was trying to take me to hell, that she was going to take my place and nobody would ever be able to tell I was gone. I had been a doubting agnostic at the time, but this shit was so real. I was so desperate that I prayed to God, and almost immediately it all faded away. That was the day I became a Christian. I guess I can double as a born again story, if that's what you call it. I know they call it old hag syndrome now, but at the time I had never seen anything close to that. Never even heard of anything like that. I found it awfully convenient that such a specific event can occur, and does occur, with multiple people, especially since witches were the last thing on my mind to be afraid of. Well, that's a good place to end that one for now. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll probably be doing a few more. And let me know what you think. Please like, share, subscribe, comment, do all or any of those things if you don't mind. And we'll talk to you later. Bye.